So, funny thing. When I started watching episode 5, I said to myself, the Dom, you're just going to have to accept the VFD stuff. It's going to be playing a much bigger part in this, and it's not going to make any sense to you that they never tried to help the children until after the fact. If you keep bitching about it in every one of your episodes, they're going to become really repetitive, and you're going to alienate a large chunk of your audience. And then I watched an episode where they don't let the VFD stuff completely take over the plot, and a volunteer actually helps the children when they need it. Well played, Netflix. You made me look like a damn fool for underestimating you. It won't happen again. Anyways, just before I start at the beginning of the episode, I would like to acknowledge that it has been brought to my attention that the actor playing Montgomery is in fact 50 years old, meaning he is more age appropriate for the role than I thought, and I am super keen to know what skincare regime he uses. I kind of feel like they were pushing their luck a bit with the theme tune this time. They played a bit fast and loose with the amount of syllables you can realistically cram into the rhyming scheme. It's a bad sign that they're struggling with it this early on. I can't be the only guy who finds it weird that Netflix is doing a catch-up plot dump at the start of every episode, because, I mean, Netflix in particular has been so successful in revolutionising the way we watch things. We binge seasons that are released all at once instead of watching them every week for months, so I don't know, it just seems weird that they're assuming we would have forgotten everything between episodes. Okay, so question, was the taxi driver someone who's, like, really famous in America? Because I didn't recognise him, but everything he did seemed to scream celebrity cameo. His character seemed very, very pointless, so it was either that or he's going to turn out to be like an undercover volunteer agent in the next one, or I guess conceivably it could just be bad directing. I was genuinely surprised to find out that the same guy who directed The Bad Beginning also did this one too, because I didn't notice anything particularly wrong with the first story, but I spied some straight up amateur mistakes in the wide window. I couldn't believe some of it. Like, at one point the camera's panning around the CGI taxi as it drives up the cliff roads, and the taxi driver is talking non-stop about philosophy, but they forgot to animate his lips moving. I mean, seriously, if you can, go and watch that scene again, because it is insane. Then there were the continuity errors, like when the kids were exchanging their crappy gifts with each other. In one shot, baby Sunny is putting her rattle in her bowl of food, then it cuts and it's on the table, which I know that seems like a minor point, but they were actually discussing uses for the rattle and drawing attention to it at the time, so it's much more likely the audience would have been looking at it. Speaking of Sunny, the baby playing her is definitely the best actor in this, and for once I'm not using that as an insult to the other actors. I don't know how they did it. Maybe it was pure luck, perseverance, or just a really, really smart baby, but at one point, when Aunt Josephine said something particularly weird, they cut to the expression of utter bewilderment on the baby's face, and it just made me split my sides laughing. They didn't even bother adding subtitles because everyone could tell it was perfect already. The panning shot that went over the top of the house actually set off my vertigo a little bit. That certainly wouldn't be my dream home. While Aunt Josephine being super grammar obsessed is very book loyal, because they've played up so many other characters doing it before now, it takes longer for it to become clear that this was her thing, you know? Josephine seems to be more nervous than paranoid in this. I remember the book character being an abstract coward, but not like jumpy in the same way. Once again, this show ticked off a lot of boxes in regards to book accuracy. The irrational fear of real estate agents, the grammar-related secret note, and Sunny using her inhuman biting powers to reveal Olaf at the end. Don't think these things are going unappreciated, Netflix. You may not be doing as good a job as I was expecting from you, but you're still showing the film how it's done. So, like I was saying before, I was a lot less annoyed in this one with the level they came to in regards to volunteer fire department involvement. I feel like they were a lot more subtle with it. Instead of having their current guardian all wrapped up in it, they brought in a new guy, and instead of having them do nothing until after the storyline was concluded, they changed it just enough that he was needed in some small way to help them out. You see, in the books the kids hung on to the peppermints that they were given at the start and ate them to get an excuse to leave the restaurant. When they threw them away in the show, I was like, wait, don't they need those? So when they were trying to find an out, the VFD agent came to their rescue and served them some new peppermints. I thought that was a much more clever way to work in the new stuff without it being too obnoxious. Kudos, Netflix. If you can keep it to that level, I think maybe we'll get along after all. No promises, though. Oh, and by the way, it's official. The Dom is not a smart person, because after I spent 2 episodes complaining about the VFD, when the waiter started writing his secret message in the cheer-up burgers, I was like, what's he writing a V for? Derp. Wait, hang on. Why was Olaf letting the volunteer do the waitering in the first place? If he'd had one of his troupe do it in disguise, it's not like Poe would have noticed. Even though I was happier with the VFD stuff, there was quite a few changes from the book's plot in this that had nothing to do with that, like the kids tricking Josephine into leaving the house so they could cook a hot meal for themselves, or the action scene as the house falls off the cliff, which is almost certainly just there because that was a big thing in the film. It's actually kind of amazing just how much influence Netflix is taking from the film, considering it didn't do well enough to get sequels. Aunt Josephine, having been a fearless adventurer before the death of her husband, is a prime example of this. There's nothing like that in the book, just the film and now the Netflix show. This plays right into the selective evolution theory I spoke about in my Dracula Lost in Adaptation episodes. The strong elements of the first adaptation are surviving while the weaker parts are dying off. This change does raise some questions though, like, if the VFD were going to put all their faith in her to protect the children, how were they unaware of her massive personality shift? Like, it's hard to imagine her new abstract cowardice could have escaped their notice. In general, I imagine it's got to be pretty hard when adapting certain books in which some of the best lines are said by the narrator, so you can't use them in the film or show. Some screenwriters try to get around this by converting this to dialogue and having the characters say these lines instead. Aunt Josephine's description of the loss of a loved one as being like climbing the stairs in the dark and expecting there to be just one more step than there is, so you get that moment of complete disorientation, was originally how Snicket described how the kids felt about losing Uncle Monty in the Reptile Room book. The issue I have with them doing it here is this is one of the very few shows that does in fact have the narrator available to say his own lines, so why are they passing them around between characters and episodes like this? I'm assuming that Netflix must really like the actors playing the acting troupe henchmen because they're all in every episode. In the book, Olaf tended to only bring one or two of them with him per book after the first one. In the Reptile Room, it was just him and Hook Hands, and in the Wide Window, it was just him and the one who looks like neither a man nor a woman, who incidentally is credited as the person of indeterminate gender in the show. I can't tell if that's a result of trying to be more PC, or if it's just a catchier name. Personally, I'm just relieved they didn't go with the mixed gender Harvey Dent look again. I actually thought for a bit that the waiter volunteer had been killed by that lime, because it looks for all the world like he cracks his skull open on it and then you don't see him again until the next episode. That would have been a really fucked up way to kill someone off, you know, death by fruit. I totally saw the "not yet" line coming when Snicket was talking about Aunt Josephine not being dead at the end of episode 5. Not that that makes it a bad line, it was just super obvious that it was coming. I was wondering how Netflix was going to explain why the hole in the window was body-shaped when they finally got around to revealing that she didn't jump out of the window. Then when I saw how she did it, I wondered why no one noticed that the statue was suddenly gone, but then I had to concede that I hadn't noticed the statue was gone, so I couldn't really judge. I feel like Mr. Poe is drawing far too much attention to the complete lack of sense in his actions in this. I mean, I know, that's the joke, but the point of Mr. Poe in the books is you're supposed to get really frustrated at him and his actions, and even though this character clearly doesn't see the irony in what he's saying, it still feels slightly cathartic having his stupidity laid bare like that, and that's just not the point, you know? Actually, I take that back. I don't dislike this, it's more that I'm quite torn about it, because it's a clear shift away from the book's dark comedy towards, you know, regular comedy. So the adaptation critic in me is saying, no, but the part of me that just likes things to be funny is saying, yay. They completely left out the parts just before the kids stole the boat, where they need to get the key from around the neck of the sleeping androgynous henchman, and then end up getting into a big fight with him/her. The one who looks like neither a man nor a woman was this huge monster-like creature that never spoke in the books. I guess seeing the three kids beating the shit out of Matthew Cardipole wouldn't have been quite the same, but I still would have liked to have seen it. In addition to Neil Patrick Harris doing over-the-top acting and funny voices, the show also appears to be relying quite heavily on the kind of humour that comes from Snicket saying, "You should never do a thing," and then immediately cutting to the orphans doing the thing. Patrick Warburton is by far my favourite part of this series, but that just wasn't doing it for me after the 5th or 6th time they sequentially did this joke. Again, this is another situation where this kind of humour is quite loyal to the book's original tone, so Another straight-up improvement on the books I noticed. I never understood why murder-happy Olaf was willing to let Josephine go with a threat and instructions to fake her death, instead of just chucking her straight in the lake after he forced her to write out her will. Netflix shows he was planning to do exactly that, but she faked her death and got away just in time. The scene where the kids confront Aunt Josephine about the VFD stuff in the boat on the way back from the cave is not in the book, and it's almost shot-for-shot identical to the film. Now, I didn't want to class this as 100% film influence because, I mean, that is a logical time for them to have a heart-to-heart if they're going to have one, you know, the calm before the storm and all that. But they then go on to rip off the leech attack in the V formation and the chewed up or visual joke in virtually exactly the same way as well, so yeah, this is copied homework and no mistake. Shame on you, Netflix. I really wish characters like Josephine would stop saying stuff about knowing Olaf when they were younger. I mean, I'm trying so hard to accept that this is a surreal world where things are really tongue-in-cheek and on a certain level are not supposed to make sense, but when they do that, I just can't switch off the part of my brain that's screaming, "Then why didn't you recognize him, you absolute dumbass?" So, this bit. The kids are trying to set a scarf on fire so they can signal for help, so they try to use a pair of binoculars to intensify the light from a distant lighthouse, but it's just not quite the right angle. Fortunately, the mystery parents just happen to be flying overhead at that exact moment and look down on them with their own binoculars. The light reflecting off said binoculars is apparently so powerful it creates a laser beam which passes down through the kids' binoculars and sets the scarf on fire. No. I'm sorry, no. I don't care what fantastical world you live in, that does not physics. It's not massively dissimilar to the events of the books, you know, except there it was moonlight and there were no mystery parents, obviously, but you know what? It was the stupidest thing I've ever read in a book, and the show somehow made it stupider. I felt dumber after reading it. Watching it almost made me non-sentient. Leaving aside how painfully bad the science is, it's worth mentioning that in the book, it worked, and it was entirely Violet's idea. Netflix gave Klaus the credit, so I'm starting to wonder if maybe we have another Legolas effect on our hands here. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Josephine getting her courage back at the last minute is an interesting change because it only makes sense in the context of the heroic past that the film gave her, but the film had no such turnaround. What we're seeing here is a progression of a theme over multiple adaptations, and I am far more fascinated by that than I really should be. There's a lot I want to say about their setup for the next story, but I think I should leave that for my next episode. Let's just say for now that it set off a lot of adaptation critic alarm bells. And finally, in response to all the people who have been commenting that the changes introduced in the show don't count, or should get a free pass, because the book's creator Daniel Handler wrote most of the episodes, well, trying to avoid sparking off a huge the death of the author debate, I'm just going to politely disagree and say I don't think that Handler has any more right to mess with the story than anyone else, at least in as far as me branding it a disloyal adaptation is concerned. Okay, well, I still don't love it, but this was a marked improvement on the last pair of episodes. Let's see if they can keep it going and end on a relatively high note. I will see you all at the miserable mill. Hey beautiful watchers, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that there's a variety of rewards you can earn by becoming a Patreon, including early access to all videos, getting to be a part of the survey about how many people saw the film and read the book, or playing Minecraft with me on my 24-hour server. Higher level contributors can also join the Dom Skype chat room, and best of all, choose future episodes of Lost in Adaptation. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that, I recently commissioned a 17-foot high naked statue of myself, those things aren't cheap, you know. Fear not, if you would instead be willing to like, share, subscribe, or a combination of all three, that goes a long way towards helping my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. Have a most pleasant day, and I will see you soon. Ye gods, the CGI baby's back! Our armies are of nothing against it, we are all doomed! Doomed! Doomed!